Imagine this: paying your HOA fees on time, keeping your yard trimmed, painting your shutters the exact color they demand, only to get slapped with a notice telling you to tear down your front porch. Yeah, the porch your grandfather built. The one where your kids learned to ride bikes on the driveway right beside it. The one where neighbors used to sit on summer evenings with sweet tea and stories. That's how my fight started. My name's Thomas Reed, Tom to most. I'm 53. A mechanic by trade. Husband to a nurse named Ellen. And dad to 2 grown daughters who still come home for Sunday dinner. Our house sits at the edge of Willow Creek Estates. And right out front is the porch my grandfather built in 1974. It's broad, with a swing at one end and chipped white railings. I've painted it, patched it, kept it solid. It's not fancy, but it's home. And apparently, it's non-compliant. Willow Creek wasn't always like this. When we first moved here in the early 2000s, it was friendly. Potluck suppers, kids playing ball in the cul-de-sac, folks borrowing ladders without a fuss. The HOA existed, sure, but back then it was more about mowing the common field and making sure the pool didn't turn green. Then Martha showed up. Martha Caldwell. Late 40s. Sharp haircut. Sharper tongue. She ran for HOA president within 6 months of moving in, talking about restoring order and raising property values. Folks thought she sounded organized. So she won. And then the hammer came down. Mailboxes had to match. House colors had to be within palette. Curtains visible from the street had to be neutral. And when people grumbled, she'd wave the bylaws and chirp. Rules protect us all. But the day I found a bright orange notice stapled to my porch rail, I realized she wasn't protecting, she was controlling. Notice of violation: structure unapproved, porch addition, findings non-compliant design. Paint inconsistent with community aesthetic. Directive: remove within 45 days or face fines. Penalty: $100 per day until resolved. Remove, as in rip down the porch where Ellen rocked babies to sleep, where we carved pumpkins every October, where my dad handed me a wrench for the first time. Not a chance. At the next board meeting, I showed up with the letter. Martha sat at the head table, flanked by her loyal board members, a gavel resting beside her hand like it was a sheriff's gun. This porch predates the HOA, I said, laying down photos of my grandfather in 1974, hammer in hand. It's safe. It's sound. And your own bylaws don't give you the right to tear down legacy structures. Martha smiled, thin as a blade. We appreciate your sentimentality, Mr. Reed, but our community must maintain consistent aesthetics. Your porch is an outlier. It must go. It's not sentimentality, I snapped. It's history. It's family. Decision final, she said, banging the gavel. I walked out shaking with fury. That night on the swing, Ellen held my hand. You gonna fight this? I stared at the chipped rail where my kids had tied balloons for birthdays. I don't know how yet, I said, but yeah, I'm not tearing this down. The days after that, the fines started. One for flower pots of excessive size, another for garage door in need of repainting. Then, unauthorized vehicle maintenance because I tuned up a neighbor's car in my driveway. It wasn't enforcement. It was harassment. So I did what I knew best. I started digging. At the county clerk's office, I found old records, building permits, property surveys, even handwritten notes from inspectors long gone. And there it was, proof that the porch was approved and recorded decades before Willow Creek Estates even had bylaws. Better still, I found a clause buried in the HOA's own documents. Structures established prior to association formation shall be grandfathered, provided they remain in safe condition. Grandfathered. Couldn't have been clearer if my grandfather himself had carved it into the railing. I copied everything, slid it into a binder, and labeled it in thick black Sharpie, Porch Defense, Exhibit A. Ellen chuckled when she saw it. "You're making a case file." "Not a case file," I said. "A shield." And I had a feeling we'd need it soon. That week. Martha showed her teeth. More letters, more threats. She even sent a so-called inspector to poke around, who declared the porch unsafe without even stepping on it. But I had something stronger than an inspector with a clipboard. I had truth. The morning after that so-called inspection, I sat on the porch swing with my coffee, staring at the orange slip taped to the railing. Unsafe structure. It read in bold, unsafe. My foot. My grandfather had overbuilt this porch like he thought it needed to hold up a herd of elephants. Ellen came out, adjusting her scrubs before her shift. She brushed the slip with her fingers. "They're pushing you, Tom. They want you tired enough to give up." I shook my head. Then they picked the wrong man. That evening, Earl wandered over. He's lived across the street for 30 years. A retired truck driver with shoulders like tree trunks. He lowered himself onto the swing with a grunt. "Got fined yesterday," he muttered. "For my shed," said the shingles were the wrong shade of gray. I laughed. Bitter. "Wrong shade of gray? You believe that?" He shook his head. "They're coming after all of us. Not just you." That's when it clicked. This wasn't about one porch. It was about control. About fear. And fear spreads unless you drag it into the light. So I started knocking on doors. Mrs. Delgado, 2 blocks down, showed me a letter about her rose bushes being excessively tall. The Petersons had a notice for improper patio furniture. Their chairs didn't match. Even quiet Mr. Lang, who barely speaks above a whisper, pulled out a crumpled warning for trash can storage visible from the street. Everywhere I went, the same story, ridiculous rules. Heavy fines, and a board that acted more like a private police force than neighbors. "Why don't you all fight back?" I asked. Most just shrugged. "What's the point? They've got the power." "No," I told them. "They've only got the power if we let them." By the end of the week, I had a binder stuffed with copies of other people's violation letters, stacked behind my own. I added dividers, tabs, highlighted lines in neon yellow. Ellen shook her head, smiling despite herself. "You're building a whole library of complaints." "Not a library," I said. "An arsenal." The next board meeting was packed. Word had spread. Neighbors filled every chair, some standing along the back wall. You could feel the tension, like the air before a thunderstorm. Martha sat at the front, her smile sharp, gavel gleaming. "First item," she announced, "non-compliant porch at the Reed residence." I stood, binder in hand. "This porch predates your HOA. It was built in 1974, inspected and permitted. Section 24 of your bylaws says legacy structures are grandfathered in, provided they're safe, which it is." I opened the binder, showing photos, permits, even a county inspector's note calling the porch structurally sound. The room murmured. People leaned in, whispering. Martha banged her gavel. "The board has already deemed it unsafe." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You deemed it unsafe. With your cousin's report, that wouldn't pass a 10th grade essay. The county says otherwise. The bylaws say otherwise, and so does half this neighborhood." Earl stood up in the back. "She fined me for my shed shingles. Anybody else here get one of these crazy letters?" Hands shot up all over the room. Alberta waved a stack of papers. They told me my bird bath was non-compliant. The board members shifted in their seats. Martha's smile faltered. After the meeting, a group of us gathered in my driveway under the porch light. The stack of letters was spread across a folding table like evidence at trial. We've all been pushed around long enough. I said. We can take this board back. The bylaws allow for a recall if we get signatures from more than half the households. Evelyn, a soft-spoken widow, tightened her grip on her cane. You really think we can do it? I nodded. We already started tonight. Look around, you're not alone anymore. Noah, my younger daughter who'd come home for the weekend, stepped forward with a clipboard. Then let's get signatures. And just like that, what started as one man defending a porch turned into a movement. The recall election was scheduled for early September. And by then, Willow Creek felt like it was holding its breath. Every conversation at the mailbox, every handshake at church, every whisper at the grocery store circled back to one thing: would Martha finally lose her grip? Of course. She wasn't going quietly. 2 weeks before the vote, thick envelopes started showing up in our mailboxes, official looking, but wrapped in spin. Inside was a so-called community safety report, stamped with the HOA's logo. It claimed that my porch, Evelyn's frog statue, Earl's shed, and half a dozen other violations posed serious threats to property values and neighborhood safety. The kicker, she attached photos. Someone had been sneaking around, snapping pictures of people's yards at night. When I spread the papers across my kitchen table, Ellen covered her mouth. This is intimidation, plain and simple. Noah slammed his fist down. She's stalking people. I slid the pages into the binder, labeling the tabs scare tactics. My voice was steady, but my hands shook. Then came the lawsuit. One Thursday morning, a deputy knocked on my door. You've been served, he said, handing me a thick packet. Karen, no? Martha was suing me for defamation, claimed I'd ruined her reputation, caused her severe emotional distress, and conspired to unlawfully usurp authority. She demanded damages, attorney fees, and of course the demolition of my porch. Ellen read it twice, then tossed it on the table. Emotional distress, you've been quoting her own bylaws. Still, I felt that knot in my gut. Seeing my name in all caps on a lawsuit makes a man wonder how far his opponent will go. I called Tasha, a lawyer friend. She flipped through the pages and snorted. Classic slap. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. Judges hate these. We'll file for dismissal. And sure enough, in court the judge barely let Martha's lawyer finish before saying, dismissed with prejudice. Done. But the way Martha looked at me when she left that fire in her eyes told me this wasn't the end. A week later, Earl called me late at night. Tom, you'd better check your porch. I ran outside, heart pounding. Sure enough, someone had dumped a bucket of paint across the swing and railing. Bright neon pink, splattered like blood. Noah came running, phone in hand. The deer cam caught him, he said. And there it was, 2 figures in hoodies, one holding the bucket, sprinting off into the dark. The license plate on their truck belonged to a landscaping company Martha had used before. Deputy Collins arrested the men, but Martha denied involvement. Around Willow Creek, though nobody believed her. Meanwhile, the new interim board neighbors we actually trusted kept moving forward. They froze fines, ordered an audit, and when the numbers came out, folks gasped. Tens of thousands of dollars funneled into consulting fees for companies run by Martha's relatives. Money that should have gone to pool repairs, playground equipment, roadwork gone. At the next open meeting, Carla, the acting chairwoman, stood tall. We're done with fear. We're done with secrecy. Willow Creek belongs to its homeowners, not a dictator with a gavel. The applause nearly shook the walls. Then, in October, came the moment I'll never forget. The board voted unanimously to recognize my porch, the one thing that started it all, as a heritage landmark of Willow Creek. They ordered a bronze plaque, right there on the rail. The day they bolted it in, neighbors gathered, clapping and cheering. Evelyn cried. Earl slapped my back. Ellen smiled so wide her eyes sparkled. I touched the plaque, cool under my palm, and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. You're safe now, I whispered, but in the back of my mind, I knew better. Bullies don't fade out. They thrash until the very last. And sure enough, one more storm was coming. November crept in, cold and damp. But Willow Creek wasn't calm, even with the plaque bolted on my porch rail, even with neighbors smiling freer than they had in years. I could feel it Martha wasn't done. It started small. Anonymous flyers slipped under doors late at night. Grainy photos of cracked sidewalks. Leaning mailboxes. Chipped paint all stamped with the words, "This is what happens without strong leadership." Neighbors just laughed at first. Evelyn waved hers in the air and said, "Strong leadership, my foot. My frog statue's stronger than she is." But I knew propaganda when I saw it. She was trying to seed doubt. Then came the break-in. One icy night. Around 2 a.m, Noah shook me awake. "Dad?" The camera. We ran to the porch. And sure enough, the motion light had clicked on. 2 figures in dark hoodies had tried prying up the bronze plaque. The bolts held, but the rail was gouged deep where they'd worked a crowbar. Noah's hands shook as he rewound the footage. "Dad." "That's her nephew, the same one who inspected our porch last summer." I clenched my fists. My jaw ached from grinding my teeth. We called Deputy Collins. He took one look at the footage. Sigid. And said, "This is getting uglier, Tom. But it's also getting easier to prove." The next morning, Ellen brewed the strongest coffee she could manage. "She's desperate," she said quietly. "You've already won in spirit. She knows it. That's why she's lashing out." She was right. But it didn't make the scrape marks on my porch rail hurt any less. That wood carried 50 years of memories. To see it clawed at felt personal. By mid-November, the board audit was complete. And the numbers were damning. Tens of thousands siphoned into consulting fees, legal retainers, and safety inspections that never happened. Names of relatives and shell companies. The list read like a family tree of fraud. At the community meeting, Carla laid it bare on a projector. Gasps filled the room. One neighbor whispered. All this while she fined me for leaving the garden hose out. Carla's voice was steady. "We will be forwarding this to the county prosecutor." That was the nail in Martha's coffin. But she tried one last card. On Thanksgiving morning, as families prepped turkeys and pies, the service gate at the neighborhood pond was found wide open. Someone had cut the chain clean through. If water had drained uncontrolled, it could have undermined yards, flooded basements, even shifted the ground beneath homes near the bank, including mine. Deputy Collins stood with us in the cold, shining his flashlight on the fresh-cut metal. This wasn't kids. This was sabotage. Earl growled low in his throat. She'd risk all our homes to get even. Nobody said it out loud. But we all thought the same thing. December came with court dates. Martha was charged with fraud, misuse of funds, and reckless endangerment. She posted bail, of course. But the sight of her being led out of the county building in handcuffs spread like wildfire. Neighbors who once feared her now laughed openly. Evelyn told everyone at the diner. Strong leadership. Huh, she couldn't lead a goose to water. That Christmas, something beautiful happened. Instead of fines and memos, the new board hosted the first annual Willow Creek Holiday Walk. Houses lit up with every color imaginable rainbow strands. Inflatable snowmen, candy cane fences. Kids ran from yard to yard. Giggling, no approved palette, no curated aesthetic, just joy. When folks reached my porch, they stopped to admire the plaque, brushed snow off the swing, and grinned at the chipped white rail like it was a crown jewel. Ellen leaned close, her voice soft. Her voice soft? She tried to tear us down, but look, she only made us stronger. I looked out at the laughter, the lights reflecting off fresh snow, the swing creaking steady under neighbors bundled in coats. For the first time in a long while, Willow Creek felt like home again. But the story wasn't finished. The new year held one last chapter, a celebration, and a warning to anyone else who thought they could bully us into silence. January rolled in icy and gray, but Willow Creek felt brighter than it had in years. The fear was gone. Neighbors waved with real smiles. Kids dragged sleds down the cul-de-sac without looking over their shoulders. And porch lights stayed on late into the night. The new board wasted no time turning promises into action. They scrapped the endless violation system and replaced it with something called the neighbor fund money set aside for repairs, emergencies, or improvements. The first project, fixing Evelyn's broken fence. Then patching the pothole at the entrance that Martha ignored for 3 years while she mailed out warnings about mailbox paint. When the repairs were done, Evelyn stood on her porch and called out, "This is what dues should have been used for all along." Everyone clapped like it was a fireworks show. Meanwhile, my porch, the one Martha tried so hard to erase, became the heart of the neighborhood. Local papers ran the headline, "The Porch That Beat the HOA." They snapped photos of the chipped white rail, the bronze plaque, and neighbors crowded around it like it was a monument. Letters started arriving from out of town. From Ohio, they told me to take down my grandmother's clothesline. I thought I was alone. Then I read about you. From Arizona, our HOA tried to ban garden gnomes. We organized after hearing your story. From North Carolina, they fined me for planting tomatoes. Thanks for showing us we can fight back. Ellen and I read them together at the kitchen table. She wiped her eyes. Tom, this isn't just about us anymore. It's giving people hope. In March, the board planned something new, the Heritage Fair. It wasn't a stuffy affair with rules about color palettes or approved decor. No, this was homemade quilts, brisket smoking on grills, kids painting murals, and music spilling from old guitars. Every booth celebrated something about Willow Creek that had nothing to do with property values and everything to do with community. And right in the center was my porch. Folks decorated it with flowers. Kids sat on the swing, eating cookies, and neighbors posed for pictures beside the plaque. That evening, Carla, the new board chair, stood on the steps of my porch with a microphone. This rail right here is proof that we don't need fear to make a neighborhood. We need trust. We need each other. And we need the courage to say no when power tries to run us over. The cheer that followed rolled down the street like thunder. But the biggest surprise came a month later. A letter arrived from the State Historical Commission. They'd reviewed the case and decided to recognize the Reed Porch as a protected historical structure, part of the cultural heritage of the county. I read it 3 times. Stunned. Ellen grabbed it and shouted, "Tom, your granddad's porch is a landmark now." That spring, they scheduled the dedication. The day of the ceremony, neighbors lined the street. A brass band played. Kids waved flags, and reporters pointed cameras at the chipped white rail like it was the Statue of Liberty. When the cover came off the new plaque, the words gleamed in the sun. Reed Family Porch, established 1974, preserved as a historic landmark. Cheers broke out, loud enough to rattle windows. Evelyn cried into her handkerchief. Earl raised both arms like his team had just won the Super Bowl. I touched the plaque, cool under my palm, and whispered, "Granddad, it's safe now." That night, after everyone went home, I sat on the swing. The chains creaked. Fireflies blinked in the yard, and the air was thick with the smell of barbecue and flowers. Ellen sat beside me, laying her head on my shoulder. She tried to break us. Tom, but all she did was bind us tighter. I looked out at the dark street, the porch glowing soft under the light, and nodded. She gave us back what we'd forgotten. But here's the thing, bullies like Martha aren't rare. They pop up in neighborhoods all across the country, hiding behind bylaws and clipboards. And not everyone has a porch or a community ready to fight. That's why Willow Creek decided to make our story bigger. To share it, to show people they don't have to bow. And that's how the porch became more than a landmark. It became a symbol. By summer, the story of the Reed porch had outgrown Willow Creek. It started when a local television station ran a segment titled Porch Power: How One Family Stood Up to Their HOA. The footage showed neighbors laughing on the swing, kids licking ice cream cones on the steps, and me standing awkwardly with my hand on the plaque. I figured it'd be a one-off feel-good piece. But then national outlets picked it up. The headlines were, "Wild Man Beats HOA with Granddad's Porch." The porch that wouldn't fall. Even David versus one. HOA Goliath. Ellen teased me for weeks. "You're a celebrity now. Better not let it go to your head." I just laughed. Because it wasn't about me. It was about everyone who ever got bullied by a rulebook and a clipboard. Letters flooded in, hundreds of them. Families sent photos of their own fights, a mural ordered painted over, a vegetable garden declared unsightly, a swing set called non-conforming. Some wrote that they'd folded under the pressure. Others said our story gave them the push to fight back. One woman from Kansas wrote, "They find me for a clothesline where I hang my kids' school uniforms." After reading about Willow Creek, I stood up at our board meeting and said no. The rule got overturned. Another from Maine, our HOA, tried to ban my father's lobster traps stacked by the shed. We organized. And now they're part of our community's logo. Thank you. Every letter felt like fuel. Proof that we weren't just fixing one neighborhood, we were striking a match for a lot of them. In July, a group from 3 towns over invited us to speak at their community meeting. Ellen and I drove over, binder in hand. We told our story about the porch, the fines, the petition, the recall. When I finished, a man in the back stood and said, "We thought we were crazy for resisting. You made us feel sane again." That night, their neighborhood voted to dissolve their abusive HOA board. Driving home, Ellen reached across the console, squeezed my hand, and said, "Tom, your granddad's porch just toppled another bully." Back in Willow Creek, the community kept building on the momentum. The new board created a heritage committee dedicated to preserving, not policing, our neighborhood's quirks. Mrs. Delgado's Roses officially registered as a community garden. Evelyn's frog statue now sits on a little stone pedestal with a plaque that reads neighborhood mascot. Earl's shed, repainted by volunteers. Shingles mismatched on purpose, and proudly called the shed of many grays. What used to be violations turned into points of pride. That fall, we hosted the first porch festival. Every house opened its porch like a front row seat. Bands played bluegrass. Families set up food stalls. Kids sold lemonade. At sunset, folks gathered at my porch for the finale. We strung up lights, fired up grills, and laughed until the stars came out. Carla stood on the steps, mic in hand, and said, "This porch was almost destroyed by fear. Now it's the heartbeat of Willow Creek. Let it remind us home isn't about perfection. It's about people." The crowd cheered. Noah rang the swing chain like a bell, and for a moment, the whole block felt sacred. But the thing I'll never forget, a couple from out of state Tennessee, I think, showed up with their 2 kids. They'd read about us online, packed into their old minivan, and driven 6 hours just to see the Reed porch. When they stepped onto the swing, the mom whispered, "We wanted our kids to see what standing up looks like." I swallowed the lump in my throat. My porch wasn't just wood and nails anymore. It was a lesson, a rallying point, a promise. And standing there, lanterns glowing in the oak trees, I realized this fight had become bigger than Martha. Bigger than Willow Creek. Even bigger than me. It was about every family. In every neighborhood. Who'd ever been told their history wasn't aesthetic. And we weren't done yet. Winter came back around. But this time the cold didn't bite quite as hard. Maybe it was the glow from the string lights neighbors left up year-round. Or maybe it was the way Willow Creek finally felt like a place that breathed easy. By December, the state's Historic Commission held a second ceremony, this one bigger than before. They didn't just dedicate my porch. They recognized the whole neighborhood for preserving community spirit in the face of abuse. Reporters set up cameras. Kids waved homemade signs. And when the plaque was unveiled, it read, Willow Creek Estates, a community reclaimed by its people, 2023. Evelyn cried into her mitten. Earl tipped his hat, muttering, Never thought I'd live to see the day they honored my shed. The laughter that followed rolled through the crowd like church bells. That night, Ellen and I sat on the swing. Snowflakes drifted down. Landing soft on the chipped rail my granddad's hands had built nearly 50 years earlier. The bronze plaque caught the light, glowing faintly under the porch lamp. You realize? Ellen said quietly, This porch isn't just ours anymore. It belongs to everyone who needed to believe they could fight back. I nodded, throat tight. It's a porch, I said, but it's also a promise. The story didn't stop in Willow Creek. Communities from across the country reached out asking advice, sharing victories, trading battle stories. Some formed their own recall petitions. Some rewrote their bylaws to protect history. One group in Texas even started a movement called Porches. Trees. And people. A network of neighborhoods determined not to let HOA boards bulldoze memories. The reed porch had become a symbol, not of defiance alone, but of belonging. One evening in January, I stood out front alone. The street was quiet, snow crunching under my boots. I ran my hand over the cold railing, felt the grooves my daughter's crayons had left years ago, the faint scars from 1,000 little celebrations. I looked up at the stars and whispered, Granddad, we kept it standing. And in the stillness, with the swing chains creaking and the snow settling soft, I swear I felt his presence steady as the wood beneath me, proud as the home around me. So here's my question to you. If your HOA came knocking, demanding you tear down the place where your family's history lives, would you hand them the hammer, or would you stand? Shaky-kneed but stubborn, until the storm broke. I know my answer, and every creak of this porch swing says it plain. Stand.